Lieutenant Park had been working on orbital station for exactly 14 months when the warship appeared on the sensors. She remembered the exact moment because every alarm on the station started screaming at once, and her coffee flew across the room when she jumped from her chair. They were not supposed to be in this sector. They were not supposed to be anywhere near human space. They were the nightmare that parents used to scare children on 100 different worlds. Apex predators from a death world called, where everything either killed or was killed. They had chosen to kill. They had been killing for 10,000 years, and they were very good at it. Watched through the observation window as the massive ship limped toward the station. Black smoke poured from 3 different sections. The hull was torn open in at least 5 places. Whatever had happened to them, it had been bad. Station commander received the distress call personally. They needed repairs. They needed supplies. They were requesting emergency docking under the Galactic Accord of Mutual Aid, a treaty that even the most dangerous species in the galaxy respected. Refusing would be an act of war. Accepting meant letting predators onto a station full of prey. The commander accepted. Within an hour, every non-human species on the station had evacuated to the far sections. The methane breathers sealed themselves in their chambers. The crystalline envoys locked their doors. The small, furry traders from the system simply vanished, hiding in places no one would ever find them. Only the humans remained. Was assigned as junior liaison officer because she was the only one who volunteered. Her supervisor, a tired man named Director Bong, had looked at her like she was crazy. "You understand what they are?" he asked. Predators answered. "They eat meat, living meat. They hunt for sport. They consider anything with a pulse to be potential food." "I understand." "Then why volunteer?" Thought about the question for a long moment. "Because someone has to," she finally said, "and I am not afraid of them." This was not entirely true, was terrified, but she had learned long ago that fear and courage were not opposites. Courage was being afraid and doing the thing anyway. The delegation arrived at Docking Bay 7 at exactly midnight station time. Stood waiting with a small security team, her hands clasped behind her back to hide the shaking. She had reviewed every file, every report, every piece of information about that humanity possessed. She knew what to expect. She was still not ready. Hai Fang was the first to step onto the station. He stood nearly 3 meters tall, his body covered in scales that looked like polished obsidian. 4 eyes, each one a different shade of amber, scanned the docking bay with predatory precision. His mouth was full of teeth, and when he breathed, could see more teeth behind those. His 6 limbs moved with a grace that seemed impossible for something so large. Behind him came his warriors, 12 of them, each one almost as terrifying as their leader. They wore armor made from the bones of creatures did not recognize, and they carried weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. And behind the warriors came the others, advisors, scientists, servants, and one small figure that almost missed entirely. The cub was tiny compared to the adults, perhaps half a meter tall, with scales that had not yet darkened to full black. They were still a deep gray, almost blue in certain light. His 4 eyes were too large for his face, giving him an almost innocent appearance that knew was deceiving. Even a cub was a predator. Even a small one could kill. Hai Fang stopped directly in front of. He towered over her, blocking out the light. His 4 eyes studied her with an expression she could not read. "You are the human who will attend to us," he said. His voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together. "I am Lieutenant Park," she replied, keeping her voice steady through sheer willpower. "Welcome to Orbital Station. We are honored to assist the Empire in your time of need." Made a sound that might have been laughter. "Honored," he repeated. "The other species fled when they learned we were coming. They hide in their holes like prey, but the humans remain. Why?" "Because you asked for help," said simply, "and humans help those who ask." Stared at her for a long moment. Then he made that sound again, the grinding laughter. "Interesting," he said. "You are either very brave or very stupid little human." "Perhaps both," admitted. This time's laughter was genuine. He turned to his delegation and spoke in the tongue, a series of growls and clicks that the translator in his ear struggled to process. The warriors relaxed slightly, though they never stopped watching. "Show us to our quarters," commanded. "We will rest. Tomorrow we discuss repairs." Led the delegation through the station corridors. She noticed how the emergency lights flickered when they passed, how the walls seemed to groan under their weight. She noticed how the warriors watched everything, marking exits and blind spots with professional precision. And she noticed the small cub trailing behind the group. He was not walking with the others. He lagged several meters back, his large eyes looking everywhere with obvious curiosity. He stopped to examine a light fixture. He paused to sniff at a ventilation grate. He touched the wall with one small claw and seemed fascinated by the smooth metal. One of the warriors noticed and growled something harsh. The cub flinched and hurried to catch up, his head lowered in what looked like shame. Filed this observation away and continued walking. The quarters were in Section 12, specially prepared with reinforced floors and adjusted gravity. Showed the facilities, the communication systems, the emergency protocols. She answered his questions with patience and precision. Through it all, she kept watching the cub. His name, she learned from the translator picking up fragments of conversation, he was the offspring of a minor bloodline, brought on this journey as part of his training. From what could understand, he was not performing well. "Too curious," one warrior muttered in, not realizing the human could understand. "Too soft, he will never survive the trials." "A disappointment to his blood," another agreed. "The High Fang tolerates him only because of politics." Heard these words, saw his small body tense, saw his eyes drop to the floor. He said nothing. He simply followed in silence, a small predator learning that he was not predator enough. That night, after they were settled and had returned to her own quarters, she sat on her bunk and thought about what she had seen. She thought about the way he had flinched, the way he had lowered his head, the way the adults spoke about him like he was already dead. She had seen that look before, not on an alien face but on human children, on the playground, in classrooms, in homes where small people learned that they would never be good enough. Looked at her pillow. It was her one luxury from Earth, a custom-made memory foam pillow that had cost her half a month's pay to ship across the stars. It was soft in a way that nothing else on the station was soft. It was comfort made physical. She hugged it to her chest and wondered what kind of comfort a small predator cub had ever known. The answer, she suspected, was none at all. She fell asleep without knowing that tomorrow everything would change, that a small cub would find her door, that he would discover something soft in a universe made of sharp edges, that he would claim it for his own and refuse to let go. But that was tomorrow. Tonight simply slept and dreamed of amber eyes watching from the dark. The morning began with a tour. Hai Fang wanted to see the station's repair facilities, and protocol demanded that accompany the delegation. She had slept poorly, dreaming of teeth and shadows, but she forced herself into uniform and met them at their quarters precisely on time. Seemed impressed by her punctuality. "Humans keep their word," he observed. "This is noted." "We try," replied. The tour took them through the industrial sectors of the station. The engineers examined the equipment with professional interest, asking technical questions that translated as best she could. The work would take at least 3 weeks, possibly more. The damage to their ship was extensive. 3 weeks of predators on the station. Could already imagine the complaints from the other species. She noticed that was once again trailing behind the group. The small cub seemed even more restless today, his large eyes darting from place to place with obvious fascination. He watched the human technicians working on machinery. He observed the robots carrying supplies. He stared at everything with the kind of wonder that the adults seemed to have lost long ago. When the tour passed through the residential section, suddenly stopped. Did not notice at first. She was busy explaining the station's life support systems to when one of the warriors growled in annoyance. "The runt has wandered off again," he said. His four eyes narrowed. "Find him, bring him back, discipline him." Felt something cold settle in her stomach at the word discipline. She had seen how the discipline their young. She had read the reports. "I can find him," she offered quickly. "I know the station, it will be faster." Studied her for a moment, then made a dismissive gesture. "Do as you wish. The cub is not worth the delay." Excused herself and backtracked through the corridors. She checked the obvious places first, the rooms that had seemed to interest during the tour. Nothing. She checked the observation decks, thinking the cub might have been drawn to the view of the stars. Empty. Finally, she thought to check her own quarters. The door was open. She was certain she had closed it. Approached slowly, her heart beating faster. She pressed herself against the wall and peered inside. Was on her bunk. He was curled into a tight ball, all 6 legs wrapped around something white and soft. Her pillow. Her precious, expensive, irreplaceable pillow from Earth. The cub was purring. Had never heard a purr before. According to every scientific document she had ever read, did not purr. They growled. They roared. They made hunting calls that could freeze prey in terror, but they did not purr. Yet here was, making a sound like a small engine, his eyes half closed in what could only be described as bliss. He was kneading the pillow with his front claws, pressing into the memory foam again and again. Each time he pressed, the pillow molded to his touch and then slowly returned to its original shape. This, apparently, was the most wonderful thing had ever experienced. Must have made a sound because suddenly his eyes snapped open. He saw her standing in the doorway. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then growled. It was not a big growl. It was not a threatening growl. It was the growl of a child who had found something precious and was terrified of losing it. Pulled the pillow closer to his chest, his claws digging into the fabric, his amber eyes fixed on with desperate determination. "Mine," the growl said. "This is mine." Raised her hand slowly, showing empty palms. "It is okay," she said softly. "I am not going to take it." Did not believe her. His growl continued, low and constant. Took a careful step backward. "I am leaving now," she said. "You can stay, the pillow is yours." She stepped out of the room and closed the door behind her. For a long moment, she simply stood in the corridor, trying to process what she had just seen. A cub had stolen her pillow. A predator from a death world had discovered memory foam and decided it was worth fighting for. This was not in any of the diplomatic training manuals. Tapped her communication device. "Ensign, please report to my quarters. We have a situation." Arrived 10 minutes later, looking confused and slightly worried. He was a good officer, reliable and calm, with a round face that always seemed friendly. Explained the situation as briefly as she could. Looked at the closed door. "A cub stole your pillow." "Yes." "And he is in there right now, growling." "Yes." "And you want me to do what exactly?" "Thought about it. I am not sure. I just thought someone should know." Approached the door and pressed the panel to open it. Immediately, a louder growl filled the corridor. Quickly stepped back and the door closed again. "He really does not want to give it up," observed. "No, he does not." They tried several approaches over the next hour. Attempted to reason with through the door, explaining that the pillow belonged to Lieutenant Park and that he should return it. Responded by growling louder. Tried offering alternatives. She found a spare blanket and held it up to the door's small window. "This is also soft," she said. "You can have this instead." Looked at the blanket, then at the pillow, then back at the blanket. He growled and turned away, pressing his face into the memory foam. The blanket was rejected. Eventually, word reached Hai Fang. He arrived at its quarters with two warriors, his four eyes blazing with something between anger and embarrassment. "Open the door," he commanded. The door slid open to reveal, still clutching the pillow, still growling. When he saw, the growl did not stop. If anything, it grew louder. "Release the human's property," ordered. "You shame your bloodline with this behavior." Pressed himself into the corner of the bunk, the pillow held before him like a shield. His eyes were wide with fear, but he did not obey. He did not let go. "He defies me," said, his voice flat with disbelief. "A cub defies the Hai Fang." The two warriors moved forward, clearly intending to drag out by force, and in that moment made a decision that would change everything. "Stop," she said. The warriors stopped. They looked at with an expression she could not read. "He can keep it," said. "The pillow, he can keep it." Silence fell over the corridor. Even stopped growling, his large eyes fixed on with something like hope. "It is your territory," said slowly. "He has claimed what is yours. This is a grave insult. It is punishable by—" "Among humans," interrupted, "we call this something else." Tilted his massive head. "What do you call it?" Looked at the small cub huddled on her bunk, a predator who had never known softness until today. A child who had found one good thing in a universe of sharp edges and refused to let it go. "We call it adoption," she said. Stared at her for a long moment. The warriors shifted uneasily, held his breath. Then made that grinding sound that had learned was laughter. "Adoption," he repeated. "The human adopts a pillow thief." "The pillow was a gift," said firmly. "Freely given. There is no theft. There is no insult. There is only a gift between friends." Was watching her with those two large eyes. He had stopped pressing himself into the corner. His grip on the pillow had relaxed just slightly. "You are strange creatures," said finally. "But you are entertaining, very well. The cub keeps his soft cloud. But he is your responsibility now, human. Whatever trouble he causes, you answer for it." Nodded, "I understand." Turned and walked away, his warriors following. At the corridor junction, he paused and looked back. "The cub has never had a friend before," he said quietly. "Perhaps he chose better than he knew." Then he was gone, and was left standing in her doorway, looking at a small predator cub who was slowly, carefully beginning to purr again. News traveled fast on Orbital Station. By the end of the first day, everyone knew about the cub and the stolen pillow. By the end of the second day, the story had spread to 3 neighboring systems. By the third day, the pillow had a name. Security Chief was the one who started it. He was reviewing the incident reports when he noticed that every entry referred to the object as Lieutenant Park's pillow, or the memory foam pillow, or simply the pillow. This seemed inadequate for something that had caused so much chaos. "We should give it a proper designation," he said during the morning briefing, "for the official records." "What kind of designation?" asked Doctor the stations. She had been studying from a safe distance, fascinated by his unprecedented behavior. "Thought about it. The cub seems to think it is a cloud, something soft from the sky, so we call it the soft cloud." The name stuck. Had not left his quarters since claiming his prize. He had moved from the bunk to a corner near the ventilation shaft, where the air was warm and the lighting was dim. He had dragged the soft cloud with him, creating a small nest that he defended with absolute dedication. Anyone who approached was met with growls. The methane breathers sent a diplomatic envoy on the second day. They were concerned about having an uncontained predator on the station, even a small one. They wanted assurances that would be properly controlled. The envoy approached quarters with great caution, wearing a full environmental suit. He pressed the communication panel and asked permission to enter. Granted it, though she warned him about the growling. The envoy did not believe that a small cub could be truly dangerous. He walked into the room with confidence, his translation device already forming words of polite demand. Growled. The envoy stopped walking. "Perhaps," he said through his device, "we can discuss this from the corridor." The crystalline ambassadors tried a different approach. They sent a holographic projection into the room, believing that could not growl at something that was not physically present. They were wrong. Growled at the projection so fiercely that the holographic systems flickered and failed. The crystalline ambassadors filed a formal complaint about emotional damage to their technology. Even the other attempted to intervene, sent 3 of his warriors to extract the cub by force. They were experienced hunters who had tracked prey across frozen wastelands and burning deserts. They were not afraid of one small runt. They entered the room together, moving in a tactical formation. Watched them approach with his large amber eyes. He did not seem afraid. He seemed angry. When the first warrior reached for him, bit. Scales were supposed to be nearly unbreakable. Small fangs found the gap between the scales on the warrior's arm and sank in deep. The warrior howled in surprise and pain, pulling back his arm with the cub still attached. The second warrior tried to grab from behind, released his bite, twisted in midair with impossible flexibility and raked his claws across the warrior's face. More howling, more blood. The third warrior hesitated. This hesitation saved him from injury but cost him his dignity. Opened his mouth and produced a sound that none of them had ever heard from a cub before. It was a roar. Small, yes. High-pitched, certainly. But it was unmistakably a roar, the hunting cry of a predator, and it echoed through the room with surprising force. The third warrior ran. After that, no one tried to take the soft cloud by force. Observed all of this from a safe distance, taking notes and asking questions. She was fascinated by his behavior, but she was even more fascinated by what happened when she was the one who approached. Never growled at her. She tested this on the third morning. She entered her own quarters, walking slowly, making no sudden movements. Watched her from his corner, the soft cloud pressed beneath his body. His eyes tracked her every step. But he did not growl. Sat down on her bunk about 2 meters from the cub's nest. She pulled out her and began reading reports, ignoring completely. For a long time, nothing happened. Then slowly, the purring started. Doctor was watching through a hidden camera, recording everything. "This is unprecedented," she whispered to, who stood beside her in the monitoring room. "Cubs do not form attachments outside their bloodline. They are raised to be independent, to trust no one. This goes against everything we know about their species." "Maybe everything we know is wrong," suggested. "Or maybe," said thoughtfully, "no one ever gave them a reason to trust before." Over the next few hours, continued her quiet presence. She brought water in a small bowl, placing it near his nest without trying to touch him. He watched her carefully, then drank without releasing his grip on the soft cloud. She brought him food, protein cubes from the station's supply, formulated for dietary needs. She placed them beside the water bowl and returned to her seat. Ate with one claw still embedded in the pillow, never fully letting go. She talked to him, not about anything important, just small things, the weather on Earth, the stars visible from the observation deck, a funny story about her first day on the station when she had gotten lost and ended up in the waste recycling center. Listened. His eyes followed her mouth as she spoke, as if he was trying to understand not just her words but the feeling behind them. On the evening of the third day, something remarkable happened. Had fallen asleep on her bunk, exhausted from the stress of the diplomatic situation. She woke to find that she was not alone. Had moved from his corner. He was now pressed against the side of her bunk, the soft cloud still clutched in his arms, his small body radiating warmth. He was not touching her directly, but he was close, closer than he had allowed anyone else. And he was purring. Held very still, afraid that any movement would break the spell. She watched the small predator sleeping beside her, his face peaceful in a way she had never seen it before. "You were lonely," she whispered. "All this time, surrounded by your people, and you were completely alone." Spurring deepened, as if he had heard her. Carefully reached out and touched the top of his head just behind his ear ridge. Did not growl. He did not flinch. He pressed into her touch, seeking more contact. "It is okay," said softly. "You are not alone anymore." They stayed like that for a long time, the human and the predator cub, sharing warmth in the cold of space. Outside the window, stars burned in the endless dark. Somewhere on the station, diplomats argued and warriors prowled, and 1,000 different species went about their lives. But in this small room there was only softness, only warmth, only the sound of purring and the promise of something new. Doctor watched the footage later, tears streaming down her face. "I need to rewrite everything," she said. "Every paper, every theory, everything we thought we knew about the—" "What will you say?" asked. Looked at the image frozen on her screen. A small cub pressed against a human's side, a stolen pillow clutched like treasure. "That they were never monsters," she said. "They were just cubs who grew up without anyone to teach them how to be soft." The crisis came without warning on the morning of the 4th day. Was in the command center, attending a meeting about supply allocations, when her personal communicator buzzed with an emergency alert. The message was from, and it contained only 3 words: "Is danger." She ran. The corridors blurred around her as she sprinted toward her quarters. She pushed past startled crew members, ignored the shouted questions, focused only on reaching the small cub who had somehow become her responsibility. She found standing outside her door, his face pale with worry. Behind him stood doctor and security chief. They all looked scared. "What happened?" demanded. Pointed down the corridor. 3 warriors. "They came about 10 minutes ago. They said they were here to handle a bloodline matter. I tried to stop them, but—" A growl echoed from inside the room. Growl, but there was something different about it this time, something desperate. "They want to kill him," said quietly. "I heard them talking in. They think has shamed their species. They think his weakness has become a symbol that will spread to other cubs. They want to end the problem permanently." Felt cold wash over her. "Where is Hai Feng?" "In a meeting with the station commander. He does not know." "Then we tell him, we—" The door to her quarters slid open. 3 warriors stepped out, their scales gleaming under the station lights. The lead warrior was massive, even larger than, with scars covering his face and arms. His 4 eyes fixed on with predatory calculation. "The human female," he said. "You have interfered enough, stand aside." Did not move. "The cub is under my protection." The warrior made a sound of contempt. "Human protection means nothing. This is a matter of blood. The runt has shamed our species before the galaxy. His existence cannot be permitted to continue." "He stole a pillow," said. "He found something soft and he wanted to keep it. That is not shame. That is not weakness. That is just being a child." Children of the do not steal. They do not purr. They do not cuddle with prey species like pets. The warrior's voice dripped with disgust. "The recordings have spread to our. Other cubs are asking questions. They want to know about the soft cloud. They want to know why they cannot have softness too." Understood then. This was not about 1 cub and 1 pillow. This was about control. The empire had built itself on hardness, on the idea that softness was weakness and weakness meant death. If cubs started questioning that belief, if they started wanting comfort instead of conflict, the entire foundation of society would crack. Was not a threat because he was weak. He was a threat because he proved that could be something other than predators. "I will not stand aside," said. The warrior stepped toward her. "Then you will die with him." Felt her heart pounding against her ribs. She was unarmed. She was half the size of the smallest in front of her. She had absolutely no chance of winning a physical confrontation. But she did not move. She said quietly, "Start recording. Broadcast to every channel you can reach. Terran High Command, the Galactic Council, the independent news networks, everyone." Fumbled with his communicator. "Already done. We are live." The warrior hesitated. His 4 eyes flickered toward the device in his hand, toward the small light indicating active transmission. "You think this changes anything?" he growled. "We do not fear your recordings." "Then why did you stop?" asked. The warrior had no answer. "You came here in secret," continued. "You did not tell your High Fang. You did not follow proper protocols, because you knew that what you are doing is wrong. You knew that killing a child for the crime of wanting softness would make you monsters in the eyes of the galaxy. We are predators. We do not care what prey thinks of us." "Then kill me." The words hung in the air. Stood perfectly still, her hands at her sides, her eyes locked on the massive warrior in front of her. "Kill me," she repeated. "Right now, on camera. Show the galaxy what they really are. Show them that you murder unarmed humans who dare to protect children. Show them that you would rather burn the universe than admit that softness might be strength." The warrior's claws twitched, could see the desire to strike burning in his eyes. "You will win the fight," said quietly, "but you will lose everything else." For a long moment, no one moved. The corridor was silent except for the hum of the station's systems and the distant sound of desperate growling from inside the room. Then footsteps echoed from the far end of the corridor, heavy footsteps, familiar footsteps. Hai Fang appeared, his 4 eyes blazing with fury. Behind him came more warriors, and behind them came Station Commander with a full security team. "What is the meaning of this?" demanded. The warrior turned to face his leader. "Hai Fang, we were merely—" "I saw the broadcast," interrupted. "I saw what you were merely doing." He stepped past the warrior's past and looked into her quarters. Was huddled in the far corner, the soft cloud clutched to his chest, his small body trembling with fear. When he saw, he made a sound that was half growl and half whimper. Turned to face the warrior. "You would kill a cub. You would kill a cub on a human station in front of human witnesses while the entire galaxy watches." His voice was soft, which somehow made it more terrifying. "You would bring shame upon the empire that would last for generations." "The cub brought shame upon us first," the warrior protested. "His weakness." "His weakness," said, "revealed the weakness in you." He gestured to his guards. "Take them. They will face judgment when we return to." The warrior and his companions were led away without further protest. They knew better than to resist the Hai Fang directly. When they were gone, Turn 2, his expression was unreadable. "You stood against 3 of my warriors," he said, "unarmed, alone, knowing you would die." "I was not alone," replied, "needed me." "The cub is not your bloodline. He is not your species. By all logic, his fate should mean nothing to you." Thought about that for a moment. "He was scared," she finally said, "and he had no one else. That is reason enough." Was silent for a long time. Then, slowly, he dipped his massive head in what recognized as a gesture of respect. "Among we have a concept called blood debt," he said. "When one saves the life of another, they become bound. The saved belongs to the saver." "I do not want to own anyone," said quickly. "No," almost smiled. "I did not think you would, but the debt exists nonetheless. You have claimed the cub. By our laws, he is yours now." Looked past into her quarters where was slowly emerging from his corner. The cub's large eyes were fixed on her, and for the first time since she had known him, they held no fear. "He was already mine," she said softly, "from the moment he took the pillow." Made that grinding sound that was his laughter. "Yes," he said, "I believe he was." He turned and walked away, his warriors following. At the corridor junction, he paused one final time. "Take care of him, Lieutenant Park. The universe has very little softness in it. Perhaps the need someone to remind us that this is not how it must be. Then he was gone. Entered her quarters and knelt beside. The cub was still trembling, but when she reached out, he did not pull away. He pressed into her touch, his small body shaking with relief and exhaustion. "You are safe now," she whispered. "No one will hurt you, I promise." Looked up at her with those two large eyes. Then very carefully he extended one small claw and pressed it against her hand. Not to scratch, not to hurt. Just to touch. Just to know she was real. Gathered him into her arms, pillow and all, and held him while he cried. 6 months passed like water flowing through fingers. The warship had been repaired within 3 weeks, just as predicted. Hai Fang had led his delegation back to their vessel, back to the stars, back to the empire of predators that waited among the distant worlds. But one had remained behind. Had grown in those 6 months, not by much. The doctors said he would always be small for his species, a runt in a culture that valued size and strength above all else. But he had grown enough that the original soft cloud no longer fit properly beneath his body. Had ordered 3 replacements. The nest in her quarters had expanded to fill an entire corner of the room. Memory foam pillows were piled together with soft blankets and cushioned mats, creating a space that could curl into completely. He slept there every night, his purring a constant sound that had learned to find comforting. She had also learned other things about her unusual companion. Was intelligent, more intelligent than the records suggested a cub of his age should be. He learned human words quickly, though his mouth could not form most of them. He learned to use a modified, tapping at the screen with careful claws to communicate his thoughts. His first typed message had been simple, "Thank you for soft." His second message, sent the very next day, had been, "Why are humans kind?" Had thought about that question for a long time before answering. "Because kindness makes us stronger," she had finally said. "Not weaker, stronger." Had considered this. Then he had typed, "Think soft is weak are wrong." Yes had thought, yes they are. The news of and the soft cloud had spread far beyond station. The broadcast from that terrible day in the corridor had been viewed billions of times across 100 different worlds. Had become famous, though she had never wanted fame. She was known as the human who had stood against predators for the sake of a child. The human who had offered softness to a species that knew only hardness. But the real changes came from unexpected places. It started with questions. Cubs on the began asking their parents about the soft cloud. They had seen the images. They had heard the stories. They wanted to know why they could not have softness too. The parents had no good answers. Within 2 months, merchants began arriving at human stations, seeking to purchase what they awkwardly called comfort technology. Memory foam, soft fabrics, heated blankets, things that humans took for granted but that they had never known existed. The empire tried to ban these imports. The ban failed. Parents wanted to give their cubs something good. Cubs wanted to feel something other than cold scales and hard stone. The demand was too strong to suppress. By the 4-month mark, Doctor received an unprecedented request. The Scientific Council wanted access to her research on. They wanted to understand how a predator cub could form bonds with a prey species. They wanted to know if other cubs could learn to purr. Shared her findings freely. The scientists were skeptical at first, then confused, then quietly amazed. Everything they thought they knew about their own species was being challenged by one small cub and one stolen pillow. At 5 months, the first ambassador arrived at station requesting a formal alliance with Earth. His name was Hai Fang. Met him in the docking bay, standing beside her. The cub had grown tall enough now to reach her waist. His scales had darkened to true black, and his 4 eyes held a wisdom that seemed beyond his years. Looked down at his former subject. "You have changed," he observed. Typed on his and held it up for to read. I was always this, just nobody saw. Made his grinding laughter sound. Perhaps, he admitted, perhaps we were all blind. He turned too. The Empire wishes to establish formal diplomatic relations with the human species. We wish to learn from you. Learn what? Asked. Was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer than she had ever heard it. How to be soft, he said, without losing who we are. The negotiations took weeks. There were arguments and disagreements and moments when everything seemed ready to fall apart. But in the end, an agreement was reached. The first true alliance between predators and prey. The first step toward a galaxy that might someday know peace. Watched the signing ceremony from the observation deck, pressed against her side. The cub was holding the soft cloud, the original one, patched and worn and utterly irreplaceable. He had never let it go, not once in 6 months. You started something, Security Chief said, appearing beside her. This alliance, the changes on all those cubs asking for soft clouds of their own, it all started because you shared a pillow. I did not share it, corrected. He stole it. Smiled, same thing in the end. They watched as human and officials shook hands and pressed claws, as cameras flashed and recorders hummed. History was being made. The future was being written. And somewhere in the crowd below spotted a young ambassador, barely older than, clutching a small blanket that a human child had given him as a gift. He was not purring yet, but he would learn. They would all learn. Hai Fang found later that evening, as the celebration was winding down. He stood beside her on the observation deck, his massive form casting shadows across the floor. You treat predators like they are not predators, he said. You offer softness to those born in blood. I still do not fully understand why. Looked up at him, this creature who had terrified her so completely on their first meeting. She was no longer afraid. She had not been afraid for a long time. Because you were never only predators, she said. You were always cubs first, small and scared and wanting someone to tell you that everything would be okay. But no one ever did. So you grew hard because hard was the only thing that kept you alive. She reached down and scratched Behind's ear. The cub melted against her leg, his purring filling the quiet space. Humans know something about that, continued. We grew up on a hard world too. We learned to fight because fighting kept us alive. But we also learned something else. We learned that softness is not weakness. It is just strength that has found a safe place to rest. Watched for a long moment. The cub who had been called a runt. The cub who had been dismissed as a disappointment. The cub who had somehow changed everything. The Empire has existed for 10,000 years, said slowly. We have conquered worlds. We have destroyed enemies. We have proven our strength again and again. He reached out one massive claw and very gently touched the top of his head. But in all those years, he said quietly, no one ever taught us to purr. Looked up at the Hai Fang. Then carefully he extended the soft cloud toward. An offering, a gift, a bridge between what they had been and what they might become. Hesitated. For a moment he looked uncertain, almost vulnerable. Then, slowly, he accepted the pillow. He held it awkwardly, this fearsome predator cradling a piece of memory foam like it was the most precious thing in the universe. It is soft, he said, as if discovering the word for the first time. Yes, agreed, it is. They stood together on the observation deck, human and watching the stars burn in the endless dark. Somewhere out there on 100 different worlds, cubs were learning new words. Soft, warm, safe, kind. Somewhere out there, the future was being rewritten in memory foam and gentle touches. And it had all started with one small cub, one stolen pillow, and a human who refused to let fear determine what was possible. Pressed against leg and purred. The sound echoed through the station, through the stars, through the heart of an empire that was finally learning to be soft. And the galaxy would never be the same.